And finally, the biggest election victory of the night was with Abdul El-Sayed when he became the Democratic nominee for United States Senate to represent Michigan. So it wasn't really until the next morning at 9:55 a.m. that the Associated Press made the call, because it was a very close election all through the night. So for those who have been following along, Abdul was the progressive Democrat, and he ran on getting money out of politics, putting money in your pocket, and Medicare for all. That is very progressive, and doing so by rejecting corporate PAC and lobbyist donations. So he was a man of his word, leaning into healthcare reform, but also fighting for Michiganders around local issues that they cared about. Meanwhile, the other contender was Rep. Haley Stevens, who was running solely on her record in Congress and even using her time working with Obama as the chief of staff for his auto worker rescue team, that she used that as an implicit endorsement, basically going around saying Obama endorsed her, when technically he didn't endorse her for that. But he did endorse her in 2018 and in 2020 when she ran for Congress. That part was true. But does it mean that an endorsement from 2018 carries all the way these 8 years later? Not really. But anyway, she ran with it because she didn't really have much else to say. And on top of that, she was the candidate supporting a lot of corporate PACs and lobbyist donations, accepting an upward of $30 million from AIPAC. And her total spending, this is where the race was crazy. So regardless of the election night results, right, in the polling, let's just focus on how much was spent. Now, according to Ad Impact, throughout the entire election, by the start and then the finally election night, it has been reported that ad spending in favor of each candidate, right? Abdul El-Sayed had an upward of spending in his favor of $7.4 million. That is a lot of money. But that was only a fraction compared to what was spent in favor of Rep. Haley Stevens. That spending was $64.7 million. Okay, so basically over 8 times as much of the spending than Abdul El-Sayed. That is crazy. A magnitude of 8 times more money that would just flood the election. If basically, these corporate interests and these big lobbyist groups, that's not democracy. If you can pay for your preferred candidate, it's not really a matter of who gets the most votes. It's who takes the highest dollar, or it's basically based on the highest bidder. That's not good for our democracy. That is not suitable for democracy. So that's why I was so relieved when Abdul El-Sayed won in that election, and he came out victorious with 743,455 votes. And he won with 48.5% of the vote. But it was a close race. All of that money and the attack ads really had an impact, where Haley Stevens came in second with 47.5% of the vote. And she earned 758 votes. It's a lot of votes. Gotta give her credit. But at the end of the day, we know that Abdul's strong organizing, his talented communication, his social media savvy, not meaning he's good at making videos, but it's good that his videos resonated and were done creatively. That's what was needed to win the ground game and on the internet, the digital space. And that is how he was able to pull it off. But now think about the other campaigns we talked about. Michigan's 1st Congressional District had a Democratic Socialist running. I guarantee you a lot of Kyle Blomquist supporters were also voting for Abdul El-Sayed, if not even volunteering for him as well. Think about Michigan 7. Taking on the AI data centers, it was no surprise that William Lawrence had the momentum because of that local issue. And even during early voting, we saw Governor Gretchen Whitmer. She endorsed Rep. Haley Stevens. Now, folks might have been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the governor endorsed in the primary. But get this, she overestimated her own popularity, because just earlier this year, she had signed a bill in favor of the data centers, the AI data centers. So now that Gretchen Whitmer was, against this popular issue of, fighting back against the AI data centers, really put her at odds with the general constituency of Michigan. William Lawrence crushed it in his primary on that issue, and Abdul El-Sayed, he was the candidate fighting back against that. So clearly that was an opening, And again, I'm sure a lot of the people who voted for William Lawrence also voted for Abdul El-Sayed. Also, there was a cross-endorsement where Abdul El-Sayed and William Lawrence both cross-endorsed each other, proving that the cross-endorsement proves a stronger coalition and power from that area of Michigan to the Senate race at the top of the ticket. And of course, we know Rashida Tlaib, she endorsed Abdul El-Sayed. No surprise there that her supporters are voting for Abdul, but also bringing them out in Michigan's 12th district. And from when Rashida used to, represent, mostly Dearborn in the 13th Congressional District, those voters were definitely coming out in strong support of Abdul El-Sayed. And like what we saw with Donovan McKinney, who won his election by a small margin, those supporters in the black community were able to cut into the margin that Haley Stevens had in Wayne County. It was because of the competitive primary between Donovan McKinney and Sri Thanadar is what brought people out to vote in favor of Abdul El-Sayed and cut into Haley Stevens' margins, thus handing the election to Abdul El-Sayed. So now he's the Democratic nominee. He will have to take on Mike Rogers, the Republican, this November in the general election. Please make sure you get out and vote. Every vote counts, and we must do everything we can to defeat the Republicans in order to pick up a Senate seat and also flip the Senate in favor of Democrats to finally stop Trump and the Republicans' reckless agenda. And that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard and want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Or you can follow along on Instagram and TikTok. I use the same handle for both, so you can follow along at NSFD_pod. Thanks again so much for tuning in. I hope you learned a lot about the Michigan congressional races, especially my favorites. But honestly, we all need to be registered to vote so we can participate in our democracy come November. We have a real chance to take back the House, flip the Senate, and finally stop Trump and his reckless agenda. If you want to be a part of that, then make sure you get involved because remember, democracy is not suitable without you.